With leather, you are going to want to wear nitrile or vinyl gloves to protect yourself, because to protect yourself really in case of any pollutants in water or anything like that, but also there might be hazardous materials on the leather. And you're going to want to support it on some kind of tray. If the leather is wet, then, as you probably experienced before, if you've worn leather shoes in the rain, your socks can get stained, so staining can happen quite easily if leather gets wet. So it's important to wear protective clothing. Leather, because it's organic and it's an animal-based product, it is susceptible to mold growth, and then that can be an additional hazard. In terms of how you're going to remove them, obviously anything that is on the priority snatch list is what you'll get out first, and then everything else. And if you can't move something leather out, say it's something quite large, for example, there is a leather desk chair in Lauriston Castle in the library. Say for some reason that couldn't be moved out, then that would be placed near the walls and be covered in polythene to protect it. So here we've got a pair of leather shoes. These are part of my sort of handling and teaching collection, so don't worry about them too much. They are looking a bit of a state, but that's part of the reason. So when you've got leather objects, for example shoes, something with a shape, obviously if they get wet, as you can in fact see with the tongue here, the tongue has become misshapen over time. It doesn't sort of sit straight, it's slightly curled, and then also you've got cracks as well, where it's become more wet, and then it's buckled under its own weight and started delaminating and then eventually cracking. So when leather gets wet, it can become quite heavy, and that is why you want to be able to support it on a board or a tray. So a tray like this, or a bread tray where you've got an open shape underneath, is quite a sensible thing to use. And what you want to make sure of is, if they are dirty, you want to rinse them. That can be quite scary, but it is literally just rinsing it. You're trying to mitigate the worst of the damage, and that should be in clean cold water. So probably a bath. A tray like this could be, say, maybe these are a little bit too tall, but something like a belt, something a bit flatter, would be quite good just for rinsing it in the bath. With these, you could even run it under a cold tap, but not a really gushing tap, because you want to be as gentle as you can be. You don't want to be rinsing any flakes of leather away and that kind of thing. So then if they're dirty, you rinse them, and then you would blot them. So with paper towels, just regular paper towels that we might have in any of the kitchens at work, you just blot them. So it's very much a dabbing motion, so you dab, don't rub, because if you rub, then that abrades the surface. Dabbing is lifting the moisture out, and you probably will go through quite a lot of paper towels doing that, but that is just the best way of doing it. Then if it's something, for example, like a shoe or a saddle, something else with a shape. Oliver, any ideas? Something leather with a shape? Oh, a case, like some kind of like a spectacles case or something. Something with a shape, and the shape is obviously an important part of the object. Then you want to make sure that once you've rinsed it and blotted it, that you are going to help it dry in the shape that it wants to be in naturally, in order to retain that shape and not become deformed and then have to go through a humidification process and stuff. So as with some of the textile objects we talked about last time, you can use a nylon mesh, so just regular nylon net, and that can just be gently pushed in, and then that is then used to allow the object to dry in its shape. It'll help it hold its shape, but it also won't hold the moisture because it's synthetic and it's got lots of holes in, so the moisture is able to evaporate fairly easily. And then just allow it to air dry, so you don't put it on anything hot to dry, just allow it to air dry. And again, you could even put it in a wind tunnel, or if you wanted it to cool, to dry slower than that, you could put it on top of the wind tunnel, so you've got other things that had that direct air going onto it, but it's still in that vicinity. You might also want to consider, if you are concerned about mold growth, for example, with books that might have a leather binding, you might want to consider freezing those. Something like this, you know, there's already a certain amount of staining on the inside. Anything that might have had human sweat, for example, on it is more likely to be prone to either biological growth or biological attack by insects. So yeah, in the event of flooding and it getting wetter as well, then mold growth is quite likely in human clothes, which is delightful. So yeah, that would be when you might want to consider freezing, and that is, again, as we talked about last time, you would be double bagging it in polythene, possibly also wrapping it in waxed freezer paper, and then popping it in the freezer for, well, it would really depend. Because it would depend on the scale of the salvage situation. We might just need to get things out and into a freezer and then we come back to them, but we are literally putting them on ice, so we don't have to worry about them for a while. So yes, so if you do want to freeze them, then you don't want to freeze them at too low a temperature, so you don't want to freeze them any lower than probably about -10. If the freezer goes lower than that, you just want to bag them up a lot more and buffer them quite well with the wax freezer paper and with the netting as well. If they are dry, then you would just take them to the dry area and keep them dry. And you want to just make sure that they are wrapped, packed securely and labelled, obviously, as with anything else, and then store them in a safe place. So yeah, if they're dry, there's not a huge amount you need to do with them. As with most things, if they're dry, you can just put them to the side in a safe place and ensure that they're labelled and located.